All right, students, here we go. The last couple days you've seen and written down some information and content having to do with the Crusades and the life of Muhammad. And the Crusades were a Christian thing, if you will. And Muhammad, of course, was a Muslim, the founder of the Islamic religion. Now, one of the things I've tried to do in this course is try to connect world history to present day. And I think you're all aware, whether some of you are super aware, some of you take global studies are super aware of this, some of you may just sort of be aware of it because it's on the news, and that is the conflict between the Islamic world and Western civilization. And it manifests itself in certain things. You know, in the United States we call it terrorism. 9/11 was the worst example of that. And so, why does this happen? Why are people willing to learn how to fly a plane and ultimately commit suicide by flying that plane into a building? What drives those people to do that? Because we in the West, we think that's, I mean, I don't mean this negatively, but we in the West, many people in the West say, that's crazy. Why would somebody do that? Well, there must be some reason. And I think that this conflict between Muslims and Christians has been going on for a long time. Really since the life of Muhammad. And when you learn about Muhammad, you learn that his army eventually, after he passed away, invaded all the way up into Europe, into Christian Europe. The Muslims saw the Crusades as an invasion all the way from Europe into Muslim lands. And that conflict is historical and still ongoing. So a number of years ago I read a really good book called The Lexus and the Olive Tree. And I'm going to discuss that with you today. You're going to get a chapter to read from this very soon. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to take a blank piece of paper and you're going to fold it in half, hamburger style, just like so. That's how we're going to do it. Okay? And we're going to write in this area. Okay? All right, here we go. Okay, so the easiest way to do this is just to say, all right, here you go. You see what I've got going here? I've got my fold, I've got Lexus on one side and Olive Tree on the other. All right, so now, what the heck does this all mean? Well, this is the title of this book is symbolic. It is a symbolism title. And I guess the easiest way for me to sort of start this with you all is to sort of define both sides. So let's start on this side, shall we? I mean, what is a Lexus, for crying out loud? It's an automobile, isn't it? All right, and it's not just any sort of automobile. It's a luxury automobile. Luxury. All right. It's got all. Doesn't these suckers have all the latest technology? All righty. I think these things, a lot of these cars can parallel park themselves, for example. They, in the grand scheme of things, they represent, what does an automobile do for you? It represents movement. All right? You need an automobile to get from point A to point B. Where are these things made? Well, there's an element that this is involved with industry. All right, these are built in factories. These are built. A Lexus, by the way, is a Japanese car. It's Toyota, as a matter of fact. Alrighty. But beyond where it's made in a factory, where can you get a Lexus? Well, you can get a Lexus. There's a Lexus dealership on Maui, if I'm not mistaken. They're built in Japan, so you get them on. And well, what does this tell us? This is a global. Okay, this is a global company. This is a global thing. You can get them anywhere on Earth. You don't see too many old Lexuses, do you? People who drive a Lexus, they want the newest model, so it represents something that's the latest and the greatest. It's something brand new. There's an element, I would say, let's be honest with each other, people who buy a Lexus, they are trying to make a statement about something, aren't they? They're trying to say, hey, look, I've made it in the world, I'm successful in the world. So there's an element we would have to argue of materialism. All right? So to me, that's what the book tries to talk about what the Lexus is. All righty now? Now, as the book goes along, the author will try to really contrast these two things. Okay, so now, what is an olive tree? Well, literally, it's a plant. It's a plant. It's a tree, for crying out loud. It is one of the oldest agricultural products in human history. It's one of the very first sort of trees, if you will, that humans domesticated. I would also say that an olive tree is permanent. So it represents permanence. You don't pick up an olive tree and move it. Why? Well, it's got roots. The roots prevent you from moving this thing. So in that sense, olive trees, how about I put this? Olive trees are very old. Usually the best olive trees that produce the most and the best olives are the oldest ones. I would also say that they are a local product. You can't just grow an olive tree anywhere on earth. There's a certain band of temperate zone of temperature, of latitude where olive trees grow the best. So you've got to be within that area. And so therefore, if it's local, I would say it's cultural. And hopefully you're now starting to sort of see where I'm going with this whole thing, what direction I'm going with this. And sort of the last thing I guess I would say about this is historical. Historical. Olive trees are historical to the point I made just a moment ago. Okay, so now here we go. We got this this contrast of these two things. The author has chosen to use these two terms to contrast what he thinks the world is like today. And I have to say that this is one of the best explanations of why I think the world is the way it is today. All right, now I'm going to give you a bunch of examples. I'm going to go down my fold here. Okay, see my fold right there. Okay, I'm going to go down each side. So the first one I always like to tell a story is one time, you all know I work at Chemo's in Lahaina on weekends, and so this one Sunday I'm walking home, walking back to my car, and I parked by do you all know where the Lahaina Methodist Church is on Front Street? So it's down from Chemo's, it's down, you go north, so I park on that street that's perpendicular to Front Street, and I'm walking through the parking lot. I'd walk through the parking lot morning and evening, going back to my car, going from my car to work. So this one day I was walking through and met the Mass. It was a Sunday, the Mass had just been let out. All right? And I'm walking through the church parking lot, and I happened to spot this guy as I'm walking. And I have to say, I was reading this book at that particular moment in time. And this moment was the first time that I really saw something that caught my eye as far as the book was concerned. I saw this huge, young Tongan guy. So we're going to call him Mr. O's Tongan guy. Now, you may be laughing when I say this, but let me just tell the story. The first thing that caught my eye with this big guy was his size. Of course, I coach football and all that stuff, so I'm like, oh, this guy must have been a great football player. He probably was he was probably in his early 20s. He probably played football for Lahaina Luna at one time, whatever. But my point is, the first things I noticed about him was he had one of those very super nice lavas on. And I'm not talking about a sarong. I'm not talking about just a sort of a simple sheet wrapped around his waist. He had one of those very nice, like almost a lahala mat type lavas that comes up and folds over. It was very nice. It was one of the most beautiful ones I'd ever seen. He had an aloha shirt on, and what the point was is that the guy was trying to make a statement. He was trying to say, hey, I'm in tune with my culture. I'm with it. I'm hip. I'm with my culture. I care about my culture. I care about it so much. What am I doing? I'm walking around in public, making sure everybody knows I'm in tune with my culture. Now, The interesting thing was he was leaned up against this big, huge Ford Explorer automobile. So he's leaning on an American car. Okay, he has just finished mass, really, I'm going to say, European Christianity, because Methodism comes out of Europe. All right, and then he was interesting. It was this may give away how long ago this was. He didn't have earbuds or anything. Remember the old Sony Walkmans? Okay, you know, the Sony Walkman that popped up and you put the CD in there. He's using Japanese technology. All right, so you sort of see how I'm getting at this. This guy was, whether he was intended or not, had his own little cult tug of war going on. Maybe he didn't consider it that in his own life. He's trying to be cultural, but what is he enjoying? He's enjoying he's trying to connect to his roots, but yet he's enjoying the modern technology of the global world. All right, now, some of the best ways to describe the Lexus and the Altra is with movies. And here's a movie I think you're all familiar with. I'm going to do 3 movies. They're older, but I think you may have at least heard of this one, and that is Whale Rider. All right, so Whale Rider is... don't you all have to watch this movie to be accepted into this school? You have to be able to talk about it. So Whale Rider is about Maori people in New Zealand. It's set in present day. All right, and the main character is the granddaughter. And the granddaughter loves the culture, and she's super into it, and she wants to do stuff with it. And her mother and brother have died. Okay, so she is. Because her brother has died, there's this opening, there's this void about who's going to be the next chieftain. And again, this is set in modern times. So the other main character is the grandfather. I think her name is Paikea. The other main character is the grandfather. And the grandfather is, if you will, shall we say, the chief. And his last thing that he has to do as an adult is to teach all the cultural stuff to the next leader. Well, it should be a boy. It should be, it should be an incoming male. Well, the most logical person would be the son, okay? The son, and okay, this is Paikea's father. But the son wants nothing to do with it, all right? The son wants nothing to do with his grandfather's stuff. The son is all talking about how, hey, we got to move forward, we got to move on, we got to get on with life, and things are different now, and those types of things, those are in the past. But the story revolves around the granddaughter and how she's super into it. And I would also sort of put over here the local males. And if you haven't seen, the local males spend a lot of time driving around in their car and they're drinking and they're doing drugs and they're getting in trouble. And so it's sort of because they're stuck and trapped in this modern setting. So it's very negative towards that. But if you haven't ever seen that movie, I highly recommend it. Here's another one. It's called The Last Samurai. Now this is a Tom Cruise movie set in the late 1800s, and he plays an American Army officer, and he's going to Japan to train to modernize the Japanese military. Okay, and what does that include? Well, that includes machine guns, cannons, Western uniforms, and there are several scenes with the Japanese emperor. He's a young kid, and the Japanese emperor, they're wearing wearing suit and ties, Western attire. So that the country of Japan is trying to modernize, and this American guy, Tom Cruise, has been hired to help the military to modernize. Now, you would think, okay, is everybody all up for that? Well, no. So there's one group of people, the samurai, that are totally against this. And the samurais live up in the mountains. They live a traditional lifestyle. All right. They're agricultural in nature. That's what they do. They fight on horseback. They use swords. They use bows and arrows. And the movie follows along where Tom Cruise, the American guy, gets captured by the he gets captured by the samurai group, and he has to spend a period of time with them, and he learns their way of life, and he decides he likes that better. And of course, there's a final battle between the two sides that eventually occurs. Okay, if you haven't seen that, I think it's a good movie. I think you would like it. How about this one? Some of you soccer girls may have seen this. It's called Bend It Like Beckham. I think that's how you spell his name. Bend It Like David Beckham, the great soccer player from England. Okay, so this is what the story is about. It's about the main character is a girl from India, and they live in London. All right, and so this Indian family in London, and what are they? There's a wedding, and everything revolves around this traditional Indian wedding. And even though they're not in India, they're going to have a traditional Indian wedding. Okay, so it's the main character's older sister. All right, but the younger, so the little sister, she likes soccer. And that's all she wants to do. She loves soccer. Her hero is David Beckham. Hero is a European guy. So this is the main. Let's put this the main character. Okay, and she dresses in sweats, and sweatpants. And she drives her mother crazy. So in other words, what the main character is doing is she is adapting to the Western ways. And yes, the whole family has moved there. The whole family has gone there. But the fact of the matter is that they're not necessarily all going that far. Okay? All right, now let's talk about some other stuff here. So how about American politics? American politics. Okay, I think you can see this playing out right here. Well, liberals, all right, liberals often talk in worldly viewpoints. Liberals are much more, remember this old thing, multiculturalists. Okay, no culture is better than any other. A worldly viewpoint. We're all in this together. We're all from the human race. We should all work on things together. They love the United Nations. Okay, so they're more globalists in their output. I think Barack Obama is a perfect example of that. Whereas conservatives are generally more national, and they're more patriotic. They sometimes say U.S. first. They love the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution. Okay. My point is, U.S. Constitution, and how about they love U.S. history and the lessons you can redeem from that. Alrighty, so you can see that playing out. Now, right now, let's go to this one other further thing here. How about this one? To sort of my point at the beginning, Osama bin Laden. Okay, the planner, if you will, of 9/11. Now, Osama bin Laden is a fundamentalist Muslim. He thinks that the world, he thought, of course, he's been killed. He thought that the world should go back to the glory days of the days of the Prophet Muhammad. They should go back to the 700. We should all go back to the 700s. That's when things really worked. That's when things were good. Those are the good old days, according to him. That implies fundamentalist practice. Muslim, I'll call it old school practice of Islam. All right? And what he's afraid of is bin Laden was afraid of, was young people in the Muslim world, whether they were Arabic or otherwise, he feared the Lexus, if you will. All right? Now, here's what's interesting about him. How does bin Laden, to defend the olive tree, what does he use? Well, he uses stuff from the Lexus side, like airplanes. Okay, most modern airplanes, very technologically, obviously. He used the internet. We know he used email and cell phones for all those dudes to do what they did on that day. Okay, so isn't it fascinating? To protect the olive tree, he uses the Lexus. All right. How about this one? Here's something. How about something closer to home? Let's do two closer to home. I think you can probably think of a couple here, but let's do what's been in the local news more than anything else: the 30-meter telescope. This is exactly a perfect example of what I'm talking about how the Lexus and the olive tree hits us today. This is the most modern telescope, at least that's what they say, ever made. All right, would advance humanity's understanding of the universe. Okay? That's what they claim. All these things, this discussion of new jobs, new technology jobs, those types of things brought to Hawaii because of that. And of course, that's the argument for that. Well, and you all understand, some of you are very into this. What's the opposite argument? Well, the mountain is sacred, we'll say, to native Hawaiians. And this sacred element goes to its historical. It's cultural, isn't it? So, what is the thing that is slowing down or trying to stop the progress of the Lexus on this case? Well, the exact same things we've been talking about, the cultural aspects. Some of you may not be old enough, but some of you may remember, do you recall the super ferry in Hawaii? It was a similar type story, the super ferry. Okay? The super ferry was this there were two of them, and there were these high-speed boats that were inter-island, could do inter-island travel, and it was sort of very much similar to this. They were super high-tech, could do amazing things, super fast, again, movement, but the arguments against them in every single case were, especially the native Hawaiians, were very uptight about the cultural damage that these things could do, from everything from hitting whales to the pollution to the taking of stones from one island from neighbor islands back to Oahu to build emus, all kinds of stuff about that I remember very well. Okay, so but I think you sort of get this. Here's something right in your backyard, the Lexus and the olive tree. All right, let me do one last one. Can you think of something even closer to home? Well, if you really think about it, how about Kamehameha schools? This is a perfect example of the Lexus of the olive tree. What is the express purpose of Kamehameha schools? To preserve, and dare I say, perpetuate Hawaiian, here it is, here's the word, culture, history, language, right? Traditions, etc. I mean, that's what she said. I mean, that's what perpetuate is right in the will, isn't it? That's what she said. Now, we could have a discussion about whether the school is really doing that, but here's the point, how has the school chosen to preserve its, shall we say, olive tree? Well, okay, when you think about all use of technology, all right, you think about that. You think about all the, every kid's got a laptop, laptops, all right? All of everything is, we have robotics classes, we have all kinds of different stuff that is going on technology-wise to sort of perpetuate learning. This is also done, let's be honest, I should say the will also said a Western style education, right? And also a Christian education, all right? A Christian education was not back here before contact. So I always sort of say, here's the best example of this. It's right in my building where my room is. If you go downstairs and you go down to the far corner on the opposite side, whose rooms are right next to each other? And I always like to sort of finish this off with, you have Mr. Pa'a's room, and you have how much technology in there, how many dollars worth of technology are in there, and that thing is really, literally right next door to Kumu Kale's room, classroom. And of course, what is her purpose, what is her expressed, her job revolves around a perpetuation of the culture. Okay, so isn't that fascinating how that works out? Okay, everybody, there'll be a part 2 of the Lexus versus the Olive Tree coming very soon, so be on the lookout for that. You will have a chapter to read out of this book. All right, I hope you enjoyed that and made you think a little bit. It makes a lot of sense, I think, if you sort of think about it, the Lexus versus the olive tree. Okay? All right, hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.